When something is important enough, you do it, even if the odds are not in your favor. It is important to view knowledge as sort of a semantic tree. Make sure you understand the fundamental principles, the trunk and big branches, before you get into the leaves, details, or there is nothing for them to hang on to. My proceeds from the PayPal acquisition were $180 million. I put $100 million in SpaceX, $70 million in Tesla, and $10 million in Solar City. I had to borrow money for rent. You should take the approach that you're wrong. Your goal is to be less wrong. You get paid in direct proportion to the difficulty of problems you solve. I think it's very important to have a feedback loop where you're constantly thinking about what you've done and how you could be doing it better. I think it's important to reason from first principles rather than by analogy. The normal way we conduct our lives is we reason by analogy. With analogy, we are doing this because it's like something else that was done, or it is like what other people are doing. With first principles, you boil things down to the most fundamental truths, and then reason up from there. It is possible for ordinary people to choose to be extraordinary. I think it would be great to be born on Earth and die on Mars. Just, hopefully, not at the point of impact. Constantly seek criticism. A well thought out critique of whatever you're doing is as valuable as gold. No, I don't ever give up. I'd have to be dead or completely incapacitated. I'm not trying to be anyone's savior. I'm just trying to think about the future and not be sad. When something is important enough, you do it even if the odds are not in your favor. The first step is to establish that something is possible, then probability will occur. The idea of lying on a beach as my main thing just sounds like the worst. It sounds horrible to me. I would go bonkers. I would have to be on serious drugs. I'd be super duper bored. I like high intensity. I came to the conclusion that we should aspire to increase the scope and scale of human consciousness in order to better understand what questions to ask. Really, the only thing THT makes sense is to strive for greater collective enlightenment. In terms of the internet, it's like humanity acquiring a collective nervous system, whereas previously we were more like a collection of cells that communicated by diffusion. I take the position that I'm always to some degree wrong, and the aspiration is to be less wrong. One of the really tough things is figuring out what questions to ask. Once you figure out the question, then the answer is relatively easy. There needs to be an intersection of the set of people who wish to go and the set of people who can afford to go, and that intersection of sets has to be enough to establish a self-sustaining civilization. My rough guess is that for $500,000, there are enough people that could afford to go and would want to go, but it's not going to be a vacation jaunt, it's going to be saving up all your money and selling all your stuff. Like when people moved to the early American colonies, even at 1,000,000 people, you're assuming an incredible amount of productivity per person, because you would need to recreate the entire industrial base on Mars. One of the biggest mistakes we made was trying to automate things that are super easy for a person to do, but super hard for a robot to do. I could go and buy one of the islands in the Bahamas and turn it into personal fiefdom, but I am much more interested in trying to build and create a new company. They were building a Ferrari for every launch, when it was possible that a Honda Accord might do the trick. You need to live in a dome initially, but over time you could terraform Mars to look like Earth and eventually walk around outside without anything on, so it's a fixer-upper of a planet.